Reading today takes place during the last week of Jesus' life on earth. At this point in the Gospel of Luke, we've already had the Palm procession that we celebrate on Palm Sunday. Jesus has processed publicly into the temple, and now, during this week of the festival, he is preaching and teaching in public on the Temple Mount. Last week, we heard a reading where the Sadducees tried to stump him, and they were unsuccessful. After that, Jesus preached about the scribes. He says, beware of the scribes. They like to walk around in long robes. They like to be greeted with respect, but they devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearance, they say long prayers. So Jesus is getting into this, giving us warnings, this time where he's giving the disciples warnings, because he's about to go, and he's giving them his last warnings. He's saying, beware of some of these religious leaders. They're in it just for show. And then they walk by and see people putting money in the treasury, their donations, and they see rich as well as poor putting money in the treasury. And Jesus says, look, this poor widow who puts 2 small copper coins into the treasury, she is giving more than the rich because she's given all she has to live on. And you can imagine them continuing maybe this walk through the Temple Mount or just standing there and looking at what they see, and people start admiring the temple that is adorned with beautiful stones. It's dedicated to God, and it's continuing to be worked on right there before their eyes. So King Herod began rebuilding the Temple Mount in 19 BCE, and it only took 18 months to complete the temple portion. So at this point, the temple is standing, but they continued to work on the outer area of the Temple Mount all the way through Jesus' lifetime and beyond till about 62 to 64 CE. So about 30 years after Jesus died, they continued to work on it. The people of Jerusalem and the Jewish people who have come from far and wide, partially what they're doing here is admiring the temple. Many of them don't get to see it all the time. They're here to admire, and this temple for them is a symbol of God's presence. In the words of commentator Debbie Thomas, she says that this is a potent symbol of spiritual glory, pride, and worthiness. And so what takes the followers' breath away as they gaze at the temple is the religious certainty and permanence that those glittering stones display to the world. End quote. So to them, this is a point of pride. This is the thing that they're hanging their hat on. This is who we are as a people. But that's not what Jesus sees when he sees this temple. They see something permanent and something they can count on, whereas Jesus sees impending destruction. He sees brokenness. He sees impermanence. As I mentioned with the kids, the whole Temple Mount and temple, it's under siege by the Romans in 70 CE. It is surrounded by Roman armies, and it is taken and it is destroyed less than 10 years after it was finished. So Jesus knows that what the disciples are holding on to as permanent and enduring, in fact, is not. We tend to hold on to things. There are things that we want to have be permanent and enduring. And that can be hard to face the fact that those things are not. Many commentators remind me that the word apocalypse, though when we think of apocalypse, you probably think of like apocalyptic movies or zombies or crazy things happening in the whole cosmos. And that can be part of it. But the true deep meaning of apocalypse is revelation or unveiling. So it is a disclosure of the truth. It is having the veil being lifted from your eyes and seeing something that's true that you couldn't see before. As Debbie Thomas says, it is to apprehend reality as we've never apprehended it before. There are things in our lives that we want to be permanent, or maybe even think should be permanent. Perhaps it's the tradition of the church. Perhaps it is the building you were married in, and how hard it would hurt to have that building be destroyed. Perhaps it's your marriage. Perhaps it's your home that you grew up in. The different things that we think should be permanent, or at least want them to be. Barbara Brown Taylor, who is a pastor and wonderful preacher, she, in her book called God in Pain, she writes that disillusionment is essential to Christian life. She says, disillusionment is literally the loss of an illusion about ourselves, about the world, about God. And while it is almost always a painful thing, it is never a bad thing to lose the lies that we have mistaken for truth. I've never thought about disillusionment that way before. Usually I think of disillusionment as something I don't want to have, but that idea that it's actually losing the illusions. It's an apocalypse of sorts. It's an unveiling. And then it reminds me of, there are a couple versions of this saying, but it's a play on the reading from John that we just had a few weeks ago on Reformation Sunday, that the truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. Or the truth will set you free, but first it will make you really angry, or another way of saying that. I've been watching Ted Lasso, and they say that on there. And so our first challenge, I believe, from this reading that I love to offer our community today is to let ourselves be disillusioned, to let ourselves be free from the illusions of permanence. And that means we have to face the fact that we probably do live in some illusions. And we're always going to, because we're limited people. We're always going to have things that we think are permanent, and then we're going to find out that they're not, and we're going to feel lost, and we're going to feel hurt. So our first challenge today is to reflect on our illusions, the things that we think are permanent or should be permanent, the traditions that we think should go on forever, and wonder if we can embrace a journey that includes disillusionment, that includes ruin and failure, a journey that welcomes that change, even though first it makes us miserable. And then there is another challenge here, and I like the way Debbie Thomas puts it. She says, the great challenge of the gospel is not simply to bear the apocalypse, but to bear it well, to bear it with the courage, calm, and faith Jesus calls me to practice in this passage. It is precisely now when the world around us feels the most apocalyptic, that we have to respond with resilience, courage, and truthful, unflinching witness. She wrote this commentary many years ago, but it makes me think of what's happening today. It makes me think of my 21 colleagues, some of them friends, who were just arrested at the ICE facility in Illinois on Friday because they wanted to provide pastoral care to the people who were inside. They were speaking words that are so simple and yet stand in such contrast to the way people inside that facility were being treated. They brought simple things to the altar that they made outside of that facility in Broadview. They brought toilet paper. They brought toothpaste. They brought water. They brought bread. They set these things on the altar, these things that people inside were not being given. One of my friends, I shared his post on Facebook, so some of you may have seen it. Jason Coulter, he wrote, he was there, and I believe he was one of the people arrested. And he said, what I want to not get lost in this matter is this important point. The people who are being held in Broadview are our neighbors. They are our friends. They are children of God, And as long as the federal government insists on dehumanizing poor and vulnerable immigrants, then we who are people of faith cannot be silent. In the gospel today, Jesus says, "When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified, for these things must take place. I will give you words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict." I will give you words. And this is what Jason said. These people being held in Broadview are our neighbors. They are our friends. They are children of God. Very simple words. How could opponents contradict that? The words that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. The simple truth of the humanity of our neighbors. These are the words of wisdom that God gives us today. It doesn't have to be fancy. Wisdom is sometimes just that recognition, the unveiling that other people are not there to be used, they are not there to be exploited, they are not there for you to make wealth. Other people are people, they're just our neighbors, and they deserve to have what they need. In this season of ICE abductions and raids, in this season of your own life, whatever you are facing in your own personal life, in this season, it can be easy to become disillusioned. It can be easy to fear. It can be easy to lose track of hope. But Jesus feels it's important to tell us this right before he dies, right before something that is going to create a lot of disillusion for them. He's telling them, he's warning them that that will be part of the process. Disillusion will be part of the process. Apocalypse is coming. Both the good aspect of apocalypse, where we learn about real truth, and the bad aspect of apocalypse, where those in power exploit other people in ways that they never, ever should be able to. All of that is coming, and all of it is here in our world today. And Jesus wants us to know that he knows, and that we don't have to fix all of it, but neither can we turn away. We are also called to face that reality, to let go of the illusion, to bear it with the courage, calm, and faith that Jesus calls us to practice, in the words of Demi Thomas. And God, Jesus says, will give you words that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. So today in worship, let us sink into those words. Let us sing words ourselves. Let us hear the words at the table. Let us receive the bread and the wine, the bread that is withheld from people in poverty, from people who need it. Let's share that with everyone gathered here today. And then let's take that bread and let's take that hope and let's take that endurance out into the world where we speak those precious words that we are all neighbors and that we are all loved and that we all belong. Amen.